No, it's not. Ah, you gotta be kidding. I went live. Okay, give me a second. I'm having trouble with the unable to access camera. I'm having trouble with this, so give me a second. Okay, everybody, wait a second. Let me get set up. It decided to start early on me, so hang on 1 second, okay? Give me a second. It's been one of those days already. So, hi everybody, welcome. Give me a second to get ready here. It started early on me today. That's how my day is gonna go. You can just tell. So, what we're gonna do is throw some Santa caps in here. Get set up. Get ready to read here. I'm gonna throw 10 Santa caps out here for today for TikTok. Okay. All right. Let me get TikTok set up and then we'll get going. Okay. I apologize for this. We'll get the show started properly. It's already starting out so well today. So give me a minute to get things squared away, okay? Well, everybody, it's good to see you all. No one's watching anyway, so we're good. Okay. We are officially beaming out to where we need to be. We get this going here. Hopefully you guys can see me. In fact, let's double check Facebook. Let's do a quick double check on Facebook, make sure I'm live. I don't see anybody coming in. It's good to see you all. Yep, there we are. Okay, let me get back. All right, so here we go. Let me go live here. Okay. I'm having issues with my camera getting kicked out, so bear with me. Let me get things hooked up, and we'll get going. That's why I was messing around to see if I get the camera hooked up right, and it wasn't, and so I was trying to work on that when I hit the button by accident because things were freezing up. So give me a minute. Let me get set up here. Hope everybody's having a great holiday. Let me get this thing turned on here. We flip power. Get the power switch. Where are we? Come on. Okay. Let me go turn the light off. I got to plug in real quick. Let me plug in real quick, and then we're good to go. Here's the cord. Hi, how's everybody doing today? Okay, let me plug this bad boy in. All right, so we're good there. I don't need a lot of slack off of here, so we're just going to do it that way. All right, that's good there. It's good there. Lighting's good. Okay, give me 1 more minute, guys, and we'll get going on this. I'll engage TikTok, and away we go. Give me 1 more minute. Okay, there we go. Sorry I messed up this morning. All right, we're good. Anyway, sorry I messed up this morning. Let me get this going here. Get old Mr. Grinch on. Say hello to Mr. Grinch, guys. Okay, all right, here we go. Ill prepared this morning. If you're going to make a cluster of it, make a cluster of it. That's my motto. Okay, let me have this. Let me do a sound check real quick on the laptop as well. Make sure the laptop sound is operating. So let me do a quick check, and then we'll get on with this. I'm so sorry for this cluster. And we'll start normally. I'll play the intro and all that. Let me make sure. Give me a second. I'll get this on. Okay, that's on where it's supposed to be. Where's my additional sounds? Volume mixer. Yeah. Okay, that's where it's supposed to be. Now, where's the rest of the sounds? I should have access. There we go. More volume settings. Give me a second, everybody. At least it didn't freeze up like it did last time. I mean, only freeze up, and it just drives me crazy. Okay, we got that. And, yeah, okay, it's where it's supposed to be. Okay. All right, let me get your teaser going, and we'll get TikTok going. Let me get to my page, and away we go. I'm sorry for the delay. Again. Come on. What are you doing to me? Okay, there you go. So let me get in here. It's already turning into one of those days. I've only been up like an hour. Kindle. All right, I'll get my Kindle out. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Ooh, that's better sound. Nice and clear. Okay. All right. Let me wait for it to come up on the Kindle, and we'll get going. It's a little early read. Some of you probably aren't even around for this read, because we're going to be doing something later live. And, okay, there we go. Is that where we're at? That's where we're at. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let me get the show started. And I apologize for this beginning, which really kind of bites today. So let me get this started, and here we go. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Hey everybody, welcome. Sorry for the start delay. I had some freezing up on my laptop, and so I hit the start buttons by accident, so I'm running back and forth trying to get started on this. Welcome. We're going to be reading real quick here. Let me get my chat room up over here. And I got to run something here real quick, okay? Make sure I can run all this stuff. Okay. So anyway, it was a real weird start, but we're back. We're back. So, where's my chat room? Chat. Yeah, there we go. All right, welcome everybody on TikTok. Welcome everybody everywhere else. And I know we're in about 5 minutes on my start when I've been fumbling around. I apologize. So everybody, welcome. Today is Sunday reading day. We're doing it early today. It's noon because at 4 p.m. Pacific we're going to be we're going to go live building a gingerbread house, and so that's going to be kind of fun. But I wanted to do this early so we could devote a lot of time and get that gingerbread house built. So welcome everybody over on TikTok. I cannot see your names and stuff. I'm sorry. You're too far away. However, one of my moderators should be in there at some point. So, yeah, if there's any gifting or anything, double tap that screen. I am an empath. Just double tap that screen. I'm going for at least 50,000 likes today. I also have a goal of collecting 10 Santa caps. If you guys could help me with that, that would be great. So what we're going to be doing for the next hour. Hi, Divine. We do have a moderator in there. So if a gift comes through or you have any questions, Divine is in there to moderate. You don't have to moderate. Just do it if you have to. All right, everybody. Happy Christmas. Well, it's solstice. It's just turned into solstice. Happy solstice, everybody. So what we do every Sunday, for the people that don't know, is we read from a paranormal themed book. And this book I've read every year. It's called The Spirits of Christmas, The Dark Side of the Holidays by Sylvia Schultz. And she's an excellent writer. Excellent author. Excellent writer. I have permission from her to read the book. And it's Christmas. It's also winter stories. Hi, everybody. It's also spooky winter stories. Some are more cheery than others. I'll let you guys know. So I'm going to read for about an hour, and then I'm going to stop, and then I'll be back at 4 p.m. Pacific today to do that gingerbread house with you guys. Okay, that's why we're going early today with this. So without any further ado, let's just get going here. Hello, I can't see the other networks. I know you're both there. And welcome. I got chat running on both. So let's get going on this. And like I said, I apologize to the other two networks because the beginning took a while to get to. All right, so here we go, and enjoy. Grab some hot cocoa, sit by the fireside, or do whatever you do, and let's enjoy this. Let's just take the book for what it's worth. It's a great book, though. It's a nice thing for the holidays. Hi, Aquarius. Hi, how's everybody doing? All right, so thank you guys so much, and I do have a goal of collecting 6 Santa caps. If you could help me out with that, that would be great over there. I guess they can't be, yeah. So welcome. And I want to thank everybody. 10,000 followers on TikTok. Man, that's pretty awesome. 10,000 followers. Went to lunch yesterday, had a great lunch. Took my TikTok people lunch with me, and had about 500 people watching off and on yesterday while I had lunch and had my cheesecake for dessert. It was pretty fun. So here we go. Let's read, and it'll be about an hour. And then after that, like I said, 4 p.m. Pacific, I will be back. What do we got here? My sister's online. Haha. She's over on Facebook. I can't see where she's at. So so yesterday we had our lunch. It was really nice. Had a nice whiskey bourbon burger yesterday, and cheesecake for dessert to celebrate 10,000 followers on TikTok. So it's been pretty fun, pretty cool. So anyway, sorry for the late start. So let's get going here in about an hour. And like I said, then at 4 p.m. Pacific, I will be back live on all three of these networks. And we're going to be building that gingerbread house. And then I have another gingerbread house in behind that one to build from National Lampoon Vacation. So that's kind of cool. All right, so let me do this and let's get going. What is your hair? Your head always itch when you got things on your head. So here we go. It's the Spirits of Christmas, the Dark Side of the Holidays. Make sure I'm plugged in. All right, the Cross Mountain. The Cross Mountain, I see. The Cross Mountain mine disaster. Hugh LaRue normally considered himself a lucky man. He had a good job working in the Cross Mountain mine near Bryceville, Tennessee. This was a modern, state-of-the-art operation, not one of those horrible damp mines you've heard horror stories about. He had a good reputation as a dependable worker, too. He hadn't missed but a day of work at the mine, and that was the day his youngest child had come into the world, and he had a pretty obedient wife who'd given him that child and more besides. They made a home together, a life together. Yes, Hugh LaRue sure felt himself to be the lucky most days. December 9th, 1911, was not one of those days. It was a Saturday, and Hugh had to go into work. Not that that was such a hardship. Like all the miners, Hugh rested on the day given for it, Sunday, and worked the other 6 days of the week. No, on the morning of December 9th, going into work wasn't Hugh's problem. His normally pleasant wife had suddenly come over strange. His sweet wife was refusing to pack his lunch. And why was that? Why? Because of a bad dream she'd had. Hi, Pamela. Hello. Hello to my sister. Hello, Pamela. Let's make sure I be here. Love you too. Okay. He'd found Mrs. LaRue already up, pacing the floor, nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. She told him she'd just woken up from a gruesome nightmare, a nightmare about his mine. In the dream, she and the children had been standing at the mine's entrance, watching as rescuers carried out dozens of dead bodies. All of them miners, all of them missing their heads. Yikes. Hugh scoffed at his wife's fears. If every miner listened to silly dreams and fancies, nobody would go to work. And then how would the bills get paid? A man's good reputation was everything. And Hugh had a reputation to uphold and a job to do. And if Mrs. LaRue wouldn't pack his lunch pail, then Hugh would do it himself. At 7:30 a.m., when the mine opened, 160 men were at the mine's entrance, waiting for the rail cars that would take them 2 miles underground. But that morning, there was a problem with one of the rail cars, and only one car was in service. The car loaded up with fewer than 100 miners on its first run. The other miners stayed above to wait their turn. Just after the rail car left, there was a roof fall near the mine's entrance. Some of the miners grabbed their lamps and walked back to the fall to investigate the noise. They could see the smoky cloud of coal dust hanging in the air from the roof debris hitting the ground. That was bad. What the miners didn't know was that the roof fall had opened up a fissure that led deep into the mountain's heart, and that cracked to a trapped pocket of methane gas. Freed, the gas seeped up into the mine shaft toward the men and curled up all cozy with the open flames of the car by lanterns that the men back through relived her nightmare of a couple hours before. Only this time she was wide awake, loaded with coal. The blast killed every one of them. The 89 men who had ridden the rails cave-ins, they barricaded themselves inside, hoping for a rescue. Most of them perished, suffocating on poison gases and lack of oxygen. See, real cheery Christmas stories, right? And some deaths weren't quick. Eugene managed to scrawl a last message to his loved ones on the boards of his makeshift barricade wall. I guess I have to come to die. Air is not good now. Well, all be good, and I am to pray to God to save me and all of you. Alt later breathed his last in the foul, toxic air. He was 22 years old, but help was on the way. The U.S. Bureau of Mines had been created in 1910, just the year before. Members of the Knoxville office arrived at the Cross Mountain Mine within hours of the disaster. The men were the first team ever to mount a full-scale rescue effort. Each man wore a self-contained breathing apparatus as the team moved carefully through the tunnels. And one man carried a birdcage inside. Inside, a yellow canary hopped and chirped, bringing a tiny bit of cheer to the darkness. This was also the first mine rescue team to use canaries to detect changes in air quality. As long as that little bird was fine, the air was safe to breathe. But the moment the canary started to droop and act listless, the men knew the air was getting foul, either with low oxygen or the presence of toxic fumes. Others helped with the rescue operations too. George Camp, the superintendent of the adjoining Thistle mine, took quick action. The two mines shared a common airflow. Camp got his miners out, then reversed a large fan at Thistle, which sucked the poisonous gases out of the cross mountain tunnels. Later, the miners at the Thistle could tell exactly how well this plan had worked. They found dead rats littering the tunnels at Thistle that had been killed by toxic fumes pulled in from Cross Mountain. Of the 89 men that headed down in that first rail car at 7:30 Saturday morning, 84 of them unalived. Amazingly, 5 miners were found alive behind a hastily constructed barricade, 58 hours after the explosion. The body of Hugh LaRue was not recovered from the mine. In an effort to placate his distraught wife, the hard-working, reliable miner, who'd only missed one day of work in years, stayed home from the mine that day. It saved his life. All right, guys, really quick. Thank you so much. Good to see you, Timothy. My sister, Pamela, Timothy, everybody that's over here on TikTok. Just a quick thing. Do not turn me into internet police. This book, was written really well. I'll do my best to clean up stuff that might trigger, but it's a book, guys, okay? So please don't turn me into internet police over it. The Babb Switch School Fire. Christmas Eve, 1924. Florence Terry Hill, the teacher at the one-room schoolhouse in Babb Switch, Oklahoma, had been busy all day getting ready for the school's Christmas program. The schoolroom had been freshly painted in preparation for the festivities. The walls still smelled faintly of the turpentine that had been used to thin the paint. Other repairs had freshened up the small building's looks. A windstorm had battered the school in May 1922 and broken several windows. The windows had all been replaced and covered with heavy wire netting to prevent both storm breakage and vandalism. The wire screens were fastened firmly to the windowsills with heavy bolts. Some folks who worked in Hobart, the town of which Babb Switch was a suburb, had to pull a Christmas Eve shift and had to miss the party. Even so, lots of folks came to see their little ones perform in the program. 200 people managed to fit themselves into the 26 by 36-foot schoolhouse for the festivities. A tall cedar tree decorated with paper ornaments, cut out by the students, took pride of place next to the stage. Red and green tallow candles, wired to the tree's branches, lent a festive glow. And the program went off without a hitch. Oh, there was a bit of stage fright, but the young performers swallowed their butterflies and got up anyway, peering nervously out from behind the bedsheet. Mrs. Hill had tacked up. She used a stage curtain. Santa Claus played, with the help of a fake beard and a few judiciously placed pillows, by 17-year-old Dal Bolding, made his appearance right on time in a jingle of bells and a chorus of ho-ho-hos. He came up the aisle to the stage, stopping to pat a young head here and putting the present on a desktop there. Santa and his helpers, parents of the program committee, reached the front of the room and began to hand out little bags of candy and fruit. Some small presents had been wired to the tree's branches, and Dal Bolding reached for one of them. The cotton trim on Dal's sleeve brushed against one of the flickering candles and caught fire. Dal tried to beat the flame out with a coat, then reached for the stage curtains to try to smother the fire. It didn't work. In a moment, the team was enveloped in a sheet of fire. The flames jumped from him back to the Christmas tree. The dry cedar ignited immediately, and trying to beat out the burning tree, one boy pulled it over. At almost the same time, the sheet curtains on the stage caught fire too. The flames climbed higher, and the ceiling caught. Then, 2 gasoline lamps hanging on the walls exploded. People rushed for the only door to the schoolhouse, but the door opened inward, and the press of the bodies made it impossible to wrench it open. Strong men hammered on the windows with their fists, trying to break the glass and make it to safety. but the wire mesh did its job too effectively, and the windows held. Aubrey Coffey managed to kick one of the windows loose, but that was all. Jay Reville, 17 years old, managed to squeeze through the open window. Clyde Hudson pulled him the rest of the way out. Aubrey didn't make the entire didn't make it. The entire Coffey family, Father L.V. Coffey, and his wife and 4 children, unalived, huddled together. Aubrey held his fiancée, Vesta Jackson, in his arms. The inferno was over quickly. It took only 3 minutes for the cheerful schoolroom to become totally engulfed in flames as the people inside shoved and pushed, trying desperately to get out, bodies piled up against the one door as the fire blazed out of control. By the time the fire died down, dozens of people had died. More than half of the victims were children. Several Babswitch families were wiped out completely. The nearest big town was Hobart, and burn victims were rushed to the hospital there, but the victims didn't get help right away. Most of the folks attending the Christmas program had drained their radiators before coming into the schoolhouse. 37 people were counted as missing after the fire. The next day, Christmas, 36 bodies were pulled from the cold charred debris. The body of 3-year-old Mary Elizabeth L. Edens was never found. Gladys Clements and Claude Boulding were to have been married on Christmas morning. Claude, whose brother Dal Boulding was playing Santa, was badly burned but survived. Dal was burned to death. Gladys was also killed. Gladys' sister, Juanita Clements Stevenson, had come from Michigan for the wedding, bringing her 3-year-old daughter, May Juanita. They perished as well. So did 2 more of Gladys' sisters who were going to be bridesmaids. In Gladys' casket, there was a wreath with a card attached. The card simply read, Claude Boulding. But Claude hadn't picked out the card. When Gladys was buried, her fiancé Claude was lying in a Hobart hospital in critical condition. The newspapers reported the fire with a near-Victorian level of melodrama. One headline screamed, "Death clamps mad hands on Christmas Day, on Christmas joy." The article about Claude and Gladys led with the somber sentence, "In the embers of Babswitch Schoolhouse, love lost its fight by 2 hours, Christmas Eve." The article told a quick story of the fire, in prose that dripped with hysterical sorrow. The girl's hand gripped her sweetheart's tighter as the blaze leaped higher. They fought together for a doorway to love's path. Love looked back into the flames, longingly for an answer to his call. No call came. Another article, triggered on the heartstrings, with a photograph of a sweet little dog of some type of breed, captioned, "The only living member of the Curtis family. Death has stilled the hands that made a home of the farmhouse of W.T. Curtis." The quietude that settled over the place that night, that Curtis, his wife, and their 2 children left to attend Christmas Eve celebration at the Babb Schoolhouse, is unbroken. They all perished in the fire. The reporter went on to describe the confusion felt by the little dog, who still waited at the farmhouse's back door, unable to understand why his little playmates, Francis and Edna, no longer come to frolic with him. 2 Christmas packages still lay unremarked at the mailbox. Honestly, it was a natural reaction to such a sudden loss. People did survive the fire, but that survival was not without cost. Speaking to the Oklahoman in the 1994 interview to mark the 70th anniversary of the tragedy, Lola Poling Forrester explained, "For years, you could walk around Hobart and see people with their ears burned off and faces terribly scarred. It was an absolute constant reminder of the Babswitch fire." 33 students had been enrolled in the school, according to the report submitted by the Kiowa County Superintendent. When classes resumed, several weeks after the fire, only 18 deaths were needed. The other 15 students had perished, along with their teacher, Florence Hill. The Babswitch school fire devastated the small community. The town can still be found on a map of Oklahoma, but there are no businesses, not even a post office there. The fire did lead to stricter safety policies in rural school buildings, including mandating that doors should open outward. Public buildings were also required to have more than one exit. The fire also created a mystery that took 32 years to solve. Mary Elizabeth Edens, just 3 years old, was sitting on her aunt's lap when the fire started. Alice Noah snatched up her little niece and fought her way through the panicked, stampeding crowd. She reached the window that Aubrey Coffey had kicked loose and thrust the child through the opening. Strong hands grabbed the toddler, but Alice was still trapped. Alice Noah died from her burns the next day, but she survived long enough to tell Mary's parents that she'd pushed the girl out the window and that someone had lifted her to safety. At first, Mr. and Mrs. Lewis Edens thought that maybe Mary had been taken to Hobart by one of the rescuers, but Mary never turned up. Of the 37 people missing after the fire, 36 bodies were recovered. Perhaps the tiny body had been completely consumed by the flames. Her mother wrote in Mary's baby book, "Our precious darling baby was taken from us December 24th, 1924, at the Babsquith Schoolhouse fire. Mary Elizabeth Edens, aged 3-year-old, 6 months, 2 days." The young mother's choice of words wasn't just the melodramatic mourning of a grieving parent. When Mary couldn't be located, her parents truly believed that someone took advantage of the confusion of the fire to steal their little girl. And that, incredibly, is exactly what happened. In 1956, the Daily Oklahoman published a human interest piece entitled, "Is Mary Edens Still Living?" Mary's parents had never given up the search for their daughter. The piece ran near the anniversary of the fire. All right, the article was read by an accountant in San Bernardino, California. The article reminded him of a young woman he knew, Mary Reynolds, who owned a dress shop in Barstow. Around Christmas, he brought the article in to Mary and asked her if anything in it sounded at all familiar. Mary was busy at her store with the Christmas shopping season in full swing, so she put off looking at it until after the holidays. Elmont Place, the accountant, was also a member of the Lions Club. He wrote a letter to Wayne Fife, president of the Lions Club in Hobart. "I have among my clientele a prominent young businesswoman. She does not know who her father and mother were, nor has she been able to find out anything as to possible relatives. There was a good reason for this. Mary Reynolds had lived a life that was positively Dickens style, even by Depression-era standards. She'd spent her life as the cast-off daughter of a viciously poor, abusive family with whom she had utterly nothing in common. Her life, until 1956, had been a hard luck tale of Mary pulling herself out of abject poverty, making a life for herself against ridiculously horrifying odds. Both Place and Fike were well aware of the delicacy of the situation. The Edens family had spent a fortune on detectives trying to find Mary. Another disappointment would be devastating. The two men made discreet inquiries and soon had the evidence they needed. Mary Reynolds innocently told Place that, as a child, she had been very fond of bacon rinds. Back in Oklahoma, Mary Edens' aunt, Bertha, remembered snatching bacon rinds out of the toddler's hand, telling her they were bad for her. Bacon rinds actually turned out to be very, very good for Mary. She was reunited with her family and told her story on the March 27th, 1957 episode of the Art Linkletter Show. There is an odd little postscript to Mary Edens' story, charming and eerie in equal measures. After the fire, the grieving community wanted to do something really meaningful to mark the passing of the 7 young children who died, or were thought to have died. So in Hobart Cemetery, where many were laid to rest, they planted 7 trees, new life to commemorate tragic death. The tree planted in Mary Edens' memory died. I'm cheered up now. All right, we're moving on. Again, please do not turn me in the internet police, okay, you guys? The Lawson Family Massacre. A cake on Christmas Day. What a beautiful festive way to start the holiday. Marie Lawson got up early that day to make her family famous raisin cake. The 17-year-old Marie might have hummed a carol to herself as she mixed butter, sugar, eggs, flour, and of course the raisins. She filled 2 pans with the batter and placed them carefully in the oven. The house began to fill with a lovely warm smell of freshly baked cake. As the cake sat cooling on the kitchen table, Marie's father was out behind the tobacco barn, slaughtering 2 of Marie's sisters. Again, okay? Bear with me. Please do not turn me in the internet police. Marie never got to cut that cake. Within the hour, she too had been unalived by her own father. On that Christmas day in 1929, Charles Davis Lawson, 43 years old, unalived his wife and 6 of his 7 children. Charlie Lawson, a sharecropper, married Fanny Manning in 1911. The couple had 8 children over the years together. One boy, unalived, died of pneumonia at age 6. Lawson worked hard. and by 1927, he had saved up enough money to buy some land near Germantown, North Carolina, close to his brother's farms. The property included a 200-year-old farmhouse and barns for storing and carrying tobacco. The farmhouse wasn't in great shape and needed repairs. Charlie was pretty handy, so he did the work himself. But there was an accident. Lawson was wielding an axe which rebounded and smacked him in the forehead. Hard-headed Charlie recovered, but he was never quite the same after that. He'd had a temper before, but now it flared more often, and burned hotter too. A couple of weeks before Christmas, Charlie loaded his family into the truck and made the 13-mile drive into Winston-Salem. He took everyone out clothes shopping and hanged the cost. Then he led them to a photographer's studio and had a family portrait made. It was Charlie, told the family, all part of a Christmas surprise. Charlie and his oldest son Arthur, 16 years old, went out hunting Christmas morning. They ran out of ammunition before they were ready to quit. So Charlie sent Arthur to the store in Germantown, about 15 minutes away, to buy more. Arthur was still in the store when he got the message that something awful had happened at home. Charlie's brother Elijah and his sons had also been out hunting. They had stopped by the Lawson house on their way home to wish everyone a Merry Christmas. But everyone, and that means everyone at the house, was unalived. The middle girls, Carrie, 12, and Maybelle, 7, had been, I'm not going to say how if we get in trouble with this, but we'll just say had been unalived. They were found in the tobacco barn. Fanny was lying on the porch, unalived. Marie's dead body was also sprawled next to the fireplace, unalived. James 4 and Raymond 2 had both been unalived. Even 4-month-old Mary Lou was unalive. And where was Charlie? Relatives reached Arthur from the store and brought him home, where he tried to process the sudden violent deaths of his mother and his 6 brothers and sisters. 4 hours passed, and still police and relatives searched the woods. Then a single shot rang out, and Charlie's 2 beagles were heard filling the air with mournful howls. Searchers followed the dogs' baying and found Charlie Lawson. He had run into the woods and holed up in a thicket. There, he had paced around a pine tree for hours, long enough to wear a path in the snow down to the brown forest stuff. Then he unalived himself. The Lawson family, murder and victims, were all buried together in a single plot. There were only 7 caskets to bury. Baby Mary Lou was laid to rest in her mother's arms. The inscription on the tombstone that watches over the mass grave is a cry of anguished confusion. Not now, but in the coming years. It will be a better land. We'll read the meaning of our tears, and then sometime we'll understand. The massacre was so shocking that over the next 5 years, thousands of people came to visit the house where a man murdered his wife and 6 of his children. One of Charlie's brothers saw a Mormon business opportunity and started charging folks a quarter to go in. People ponied up and wandered through the Lawson house in droves. Some of them were simply gawkers, eager to see the site of a gruesome crime. But others were searching for clues. What could possibly make a father do that to all of his children but one? What demons drove a man to unalive nearly his entire family in cold blood and then unalive himself? There was a theory, albeit one that gave many people the cold shivers. The theory was that Charlie had been fooling around with Marie. Yeah, Marie, his 17-year-old daughter, and had gotten her pregnant. Then he unalived her and everyone else to cover it up. Tragedy wasn't yet finished with that family. Arthur Lawson, the only surviving by virtue of having been sent to the store for ammo, died in a freak truck accident in his early 30s. Some reminders of that appalling day remained for years. Some visitors to the house were cheered to see 2 small children playing in the yard, then horrified to see those same children in that last family portrait and recognized them as Raymond and Maybelle Lawson. The house was eventually torn down, and some of its boards were reused in a bridge that seems to retain the imprint of the crime. People claim that the bridge too is terribly haunted, and Marie's raisin cake was preserved as a pathetic reminder of innocent domesticality. Souvenir hunters picked some of the raisins off, so the cake was put under a glass cover. It remained the star attraction at the Lawson home and later in carnival sideshows. Eventually, one of the Lawson's relatives took the cake home and buried it. Wow. All right, let me have a little sip of water here, and we're going to continue with the attack on Pearl Harbor. Just let me have a little bit of water here. So here we go. December 7th, 1941, the day that will live in infamy, began on a gorgeous sunny Sunday morning in Oahu, Hawaii. Some of the military personnel stationed at Pearl Harbor on Ford Island were sitting down to breakfast. Others were going about their usual morning routines. Perhaps a few were ruminating on the current world situation. In 1933, Japan had gone to war with China and was making noises about dragging the U.S. into the conflict. The top brass in the Navy had decided to test Pearl Harbor's defensive capabilities. They staged a mock attack on the base. If the Navy was hoping to be encouraged by a ship-shaped responsive fighting force at the base, they were disappointed. The drill was a fiasco. The attackers mopped the floor with the defenders. And if it had been a real attack instead of a drill, the base would have been devastated. Oddly, though, not much was done to encourage the personnel to beef up their training and defenses. The Japanese kept rattling their swords, and the Navy kept the base at Pearl Harbor without any changes. On that Sunday morning in December, that lack of preparation led to tragedy. Kermit A. Tyler, a first lieutenant in the Army Air Force, was on duty at the Radar Information Center at Fort Shafter, also on Oahu. He got a puzzled message from a radar operator who was stationed on the northern tip of the island. The operator, Private Joseph Lockhart, reported that he and another private, George Elliott, had noticed an unusual blip on the radar that indicated a large number of aircraft headed toward the island. The radar indicated a group of planes about 130 miles away, coming in fast. "Don't worry about it," Tyler said. He thought the planes were a flight of American B-17 bombers that was due in from the mainland. Those words were to haunt Tyler for the rest of his life. 45 minutes later, the first of two waves of Japanese aircraft arrived at Pearl Harbor. Bombs rained down on the unsuspecting base, turning the peaceful Sunday morning into a scene of confusion, terror, fire, and blood. The Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service sent 360 planes to destroy the base, with 48 waiting in the wings for aerial combat. The first wave was the primary attack, intended to catch the American forces off guard. The second wave had specific objectives. They were to attack aircraft carriers first, then cruisers, and finally battleships. The Japanese aircraft were a savage array of firepower: fighter planes, torpedo bombers, and dive bombers that concentrated their fire on ground targets. The morning exploded in a hail of bullets, bombs, and shrapnel. Explosions shivered the blue water. Panic and flames swept the base. No one was spared. Women, civilians, nurses, all fell in a hail of destruction. When it was over, Pearl Harbor lay in ruins. All 8 of the U.S. Navy battleships at the base were damaged, and 4 of them were sunk. 188 planes were destroyed and 159 damaged, but the human toll was the worst. Over 2,000 people on the base were killed, 60 of them while eating breakfast. Another 1,178 were wounded, and America reeled with shock and horror. There are many battlegrounds that are haunted by the men who gave their lives there, but Pearl Harbor experiences a special kind of haunting, one even more tragic. The people, men and women, who were killed in the bombing at Pearl Harbor did not fall in combat. They had no warning of their impending deaths, and they had no idea that they were even on the battlefield until it was far too late. Many of them, including the personnel on the sunken battleships, were never given a proper burial. So it's not surprising that Pearl Harbor still terms with the spirits of those who lost their lives so suddenly. Paranormal phenomena have been reported all over Ford Island. Even residents of private homes on that island tell of phantom voices and footsteps of lights that turn themselves on and off, and of shadowy figures that disappear when approached. One of the most well-known spirits of the site even has a name, albeit a nickname, Charlie. Charlie has made his presence known so often that whenever reported weirdness comes in, officers are likely to respond with, "Oh, that's just Charlie." Charlie announces himself with loud footsteps and the jangling of keys in empty hallways. He also likes to turn radios on and scan between stations. Hangars 37 and 39 form part of the Pacific Aviation Museum. Ghostly happenings in these buildings include the sound of men talking at night when the buildings are deserted, and phantom music playing. In the museum offices, lights go on and off, and motion detectors are triggered, even when no one is in the building. There is also a mannequin nicknamed Kramer, who stands dressed in navy whites in front of a B-25 bomber at the museum. Kramer seems to have a mind of his own, because he'll change position overnight. Sometimes his arm is up at night, and down is decided in the morning. It's decided in the morning. Sometimes museum staff will come in for the day and see that Kramer has picked up a piece of paper overnight and is standing there holding it. Where did the paper come from? Kramer's not saying. Hawaiian Island ghost hunters did an investigation at the museum in 2009. They captured an extremely faint EVP while recording next to Kramer and the bomber. With the hiss removed, a voice seems to whisper, "I'm getting tired of goofing around." The two-part video of the investigation can be viewed elsewhere. I'm not going to say where because you guys I'll get in trouble. So we're just going to do that. The most haunted area of Pearl Harbor is the sunken USS Arizona. A white memorial stands guard above the wreck, and scores of tourists visit the site every day. The Arizona was the ship that suffered the most damage from the Japanese attack. She took 4 direct hits from 800-kilogram bombs. The last bomb struck a 14-inch powder magazine, which exploded with the impact. That was the death blow for the Arizona. 1,177 crewmen died with her. Most of the bodies remain in the ship, cradled in the warm, shallow waters of the harbor. Many photos taken at the memorial show strange foggy spots, even misty human figures. One specific ghost is believed to be that of an officer who was posted on the deck of the Arizona that fateful morning. As the story goes, he left his post briefly to attend to some personal business, right before the attack. Now, he blames himself for the ship's demise and wanders the deck forever. He is usually seen at night, at low tide, and in the pearly dawn mist over the wreck. Decades later, the fatally wounded Arizona is still bleeding. Oil still seeps from her ruptured sides, shimmering in wicked opalescence on the water's calm surface. The Devaney family visited the memorial in 2011, and Susan Devaney took pictures as mementos of their visit. One picture, shown later on a CNN clip, seemed to show the sorrowful face of a young man looking up through the water. Was it simply a case of pareidolia caused by the Hawaiian sunlight, glimmering off the oil-slicked water? Or was it something more? The attack on Pearl Harbor represented a blow to American innocence. The men and women who died there were simply going about their business on a Sunday morning in December, when their world exploded. The spirits that haunt Pearl Harbor speak to us from a simpler time, a time defined by the greatest generation. Their voices are still heard today by those willing to listen. Right, next one is the disappearance of the Sodder children. There are 6 faces on the billboard, 5 children and 1 young man. A tantalizing glimpse of what could have been. The young man glances upwards, and his lips seem ready to curve into a smile. He's a good-looking kid, and a dead ringer for the solemn boy in the middle of the group of the 5. But the 5 children aren't smiling. The youngest girl seems especially pensive. Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, Betty. These are the Sodder children. Their story is a curious, deeply frustrating mix of tragedy and hope, and of loss and terrible yearning. Their story began in flames and ended in mystery. They are old, dark-haired, dark-eyed, beautiful children. And on Christmas Eve, 1945, they disappeared. George and Jenny Sodder were a well-respected, solidly middle-class couple. Italian immigrants, both, They had built a wonderful life together in the New World. George was born Giorgio Sadu in Tula, Sardinia. In 1895, they came to the United States in 1908 when he was 13 years old. His older brother came with him as far as Ellis Island, then returned to Italy, leaving George on his own. The resourceful young teen found work on the railroad in Pennsylvania, carrying water and supplies to the workers. George later moved to Smithers, West Virginia. He was smart and ambitious, and soon he had started his own trucking business, hauling freight and coal. One day, George went into a store called the Music Box and met the owner's daughter, Jeannie Cipriani. She had been just 3 years old when her family came to the United States. George and Jenny, married and had 10 children between 1923 and 1943. The rapidly growing family moved to Fayetteville, West Virginia. The little Appalachian town had a small but active Italian immigrant population. The Sodders quickly became one of the most respected families in the community. George was admired as a responsible businessman and a devoted father to his brood. He wasn't afraid to share his opinions, but in one area he was curiously silent. He avoided any talk of his past in the old country, and he never discussed why he chose to leave Italy. On Christmas Eve, 1945, the Sodder children opened their presents. 9 of the 10 children were still at home. One boy was serving in the army, but as World War II ended that August, he was safe from harm. George and 2 of the boys, John and George Jr., went to bed early. The 2 boys helped their father in his trucking business. The other children were far too keyed up to sleep. They finally went to bed around 10 p.m. to dream of more Christmas cheer in the morning. Jenny took 2-year-old Sylvia, the youngest child, to her bedroom and put her down in her crib for the night. Jenny, too, went to bed. Around 12:30, the phone in George's office rang. Jenny woke up and went to answer it before the shrill noise woke the household. An unfamiliar female voice was on the other end of the line. There seemed to be a party going on wherever the caller was. Jenny could hear raucous laughter in the background and the clink of glasses. Jenny sleepily told the woman she had the wrong number and hung up. On her way back to bed, she noticed that the downstairs lights were on, the curtains were open, and the front door was unlocked. She put everything to rights. Marion was asleep on the couch in the living room, and Jenny assumed the other children were all tucked into their beds in the upstairs bedrooms. She went back to bed. As Jenny was drifting towards sleep, she heard one loud, sharp bang on the roof and a rolling noise. It sounded like something had hit the peak of the roof and rolled down to the gutter. Jenny listened, but no other noise came to her waiting ears. Her eyes closed, and she fell asleep, listening to the baby's soft breathing. An hour later, Jenny woke again, this time with the sense that something was terribly wrong. Then she realized that heavy smoke was curling into the room. She snatched Sylvia from her crib and hurried out of the bedroom, shouting for George. George met her on the front lawn. John and George Jr. were also there, singed but safe. They shared an upstairs bedroom and had made their way downstairs through the growing flames at the cost of only some singed air. Marion, too, was safely outside, but the roll call was dreadfully incomplete. 5 children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, were still in the house. The middle children shared 2 bedrooms on either end of the upstairs hallway, rooms that were separated by a staircase, and that staircase was now engulfed in flames. George couldn't get back into the house through the door, so he broke the window, heedless of the glass that stripped the skin from his arm. The flames were still too intense for him to get into the house that way. George assumed, as did Jenny, that the middle children were still in their bedrooms, trapped by the encroaching flames. He knew he had to get to the upstairs bedroom windows in order to rescue them. He raced around to get the ladder. He kept propped up against the side of the house, but it was gone. George was running out of options, and the fire department was nowhere in sight. He came up with a desperate plan. He would drive one of his coal trucks up to the house and stand on it to get to the upstairs windows. But, despite having been running only hours before, neither of his 2 trucks would start. Frantic, George tried to scoop water from a rain barrel next to the house, but the water was frozen. He could only stand helpless and watch his home burn. He couldn't even hear the children screaming. Meanwhile, Marion sprinted to the neighbor's house to call the Fayetteville Fire Department, but she couldn't get a hold of the fire operator. Another neighbor who saw the fire as he was driving past drove to a nearby tavern to call the fire department. Again, the operator wouldn't answer. Seething with frustration, the neighbor hopped back into his truck and drove into town. He awoke Chief F.J. Morris and told him that the solder hung on fire and that children were inside. The chief didn't know how to drive a fire truck, so he raised the alarm by using the fire department's phone tree. He called one fireman, who called another, and so on. The fire department was only 2.5 miles from the solder home, but the truck didn't get there until 8 a.m. Christmas morning. By then, the house was nothing but a charred, smoking hole in the ground. The solder's home had been destroyed in less than 45 minutes. George and Jenny were devastated. The distraught parents assumed that 5 of their children had died in the fire. By 10 a.m., Chief Morris had finished his investigation of the ruins. He hadn't found any human remains, but he assured the solderers that the fire had been hot enough to incinerate the bodies. He told the grieving parents to leave the site untouched, in case the fire department needed to investigate further. George waited for 4 days, but Morris didn't return. George covered the rubble in the basement with 5 feet of dirt, intending to plant a memorial garden for his lost children. On December 30th, 1945, the coroner's office issued 5 death certificates. They all gave fire or suffocation as a cause of death. But as the pain and horror of those first few days began to recede, George and Jenny Solder realized that many questions were yet unanswered, and they couldn't shake the feeling that their children were still alive. As they pieced together the events leading up to the fire, some strange occurrences stood out. A few months earlier, in the fall, a stranger had come to the Solder home looking for work with George's trucking company. He didn't get the job, but during his conversation with George, the stranger wandered to the rear of the house. He pointed at the fuse boxes and casually said, "This is going to cause a fire someday." George shrugged off the remark. The fuse boxes had just been inspected by the local power company, and they were in perfect condition. Harder to dismiss was another visitor who had come by the house at about the same time. This fellow was an insurance salesman who tried to sell the Solders a life insurance policy. When George declined the offer, the man was furious. "Your house is going to go up in smoke," the man snarled, "and your children are going to be destroyed. You are going to be paid for the dirty remarks you've been making about Mussolini." It was true. George, a proud Italian, was an outspoken critic of the fascist dictator. And just before Christmas, the older Solder sons had noticed a car parked along U.S. Highway 21. A man sitting in the car had been watching the young children with unusual intensity as they came home from school. More questions arose with later investigation. The official cause of the fire was faulty wiring, but Jeannie had seen lights on downstairs just an hour before the fire started. A telephone repairman who showed the Solders something interesting. Their phone lines had not been burned through, but rather had been cut, 14 feet off the ground and 2 feet from the utility pole. The ladder that was usually kept leaning against the house, the ladder that was missing when George tried to rescue his kids, was found in a ravine near the house. And a man was accused of stealing a block and tackle from the Solder property during the fire, equipment that could easily have been used to dismantle the Solder company trucks. Later, toddler Sylvia found a hard green rubber object in the yard. Jenny remembered the bang on the roof and the rolling sound. George identified it as a napalm pineapple bomb, and it seemed to the Solders that the fire had consumed their house from the roof downwards. Most frustrating of all was the lack of physical evidence of the children's deaths. Jenny, especially, just couldn't wrap her mind around it. How could 5 children perish in a fire and leave behind no bones at all? Out of curiosity, Jenny began to experiment. She burned bones from the family's dinner table, chicken bones, pork chop bones, even the joint from the beef roast, and the results were always the same. The fire never consumed the bones entirely. Jenny put the question to an employee at a crematorium, who confirmed what she had suspected. Even when a body is cremated on purpose, burned for 2 hours at a constant 2,000 degrees, there are still charred bones left behind. The slaughterhouse fire was intense, but it raged fiercely for half an hour or so. It took only 45 minutes to burn to the ground. Also, Jenny had found household appliances in the basement rubble. The metal was charred, but still identifiable. To add to the mystery, people began to come forward with possible sightings of the children. A woman claimed she saw the missing children in a passing car while the house was still burning. Another woman, who ran a tourist rest area between Fayetteville and Charleston, said she saw the children the morning after the fire. She told police that she served them breakfast and that she had noticed a car with Florida plates in the rest stop parking lot. More tantalizing hearsay came from Charleston, about 50 miles west of Fayetteville. A woman who worked at a hotel there saw pictures of the missing children in a newspaper. She came forward to say that she had seen 4 of the 5 kids a week after the fire. In her statement, she said the children were accompanied by 2 women and 2 men, all of Italian extraction. I don't remember the exact date. However, the entire party did register at the hotel and stayed in one large room with several beds. They registered about midnight. I tried to talk to the children in a friendly manner, but the men appeared hostile and refused to allow me to talk to the kids. One of the men looked at me in a hostile manner. He turned around and began talking rapidly in Italian. Immediately, the whole party stopped talking to me. I sensed that I was being frozen out, and so I said nothing more. They left early the next morning. In 1947, George and Jenny asked the FBI for help. They received a personal letter from J. Edgar Hoover, but his reply was not encouraging. He wrote that it seemed to be a local case and not within the FBI's jurisdiction. This, despite the Sodders' insistence that the children had been kidnapped and taken across state lines. A few FBI agents said they'd be willing to help with the case if they could get permission from the local authorities, but the Fayetteville police and fire departments both refused to offer any help. The Sodders hired private investigator C.C. Tinsley, who turned up some very interesting facts. He found that the insurance salesman who had threatened George was also on the coroner's jury that ruled the fire accidental. That was intriguing, but Tinsley wasn't finished. He heard some interesting information regarding Fire Chief F.J. Morris from a minister in town. Morris had claimed that no human remains had been found at the site of the fire, but he let it slip to the minister that he'd found a heart in the ashes. He said he'd hid it in a dynamite box and buried it at the scene. This egregious act got Tinsley's attention immediately. He confronted Morris and persuaded him to return to the site and dig up the box. Morris did, with Tinsley at his side. They took it to a funeral director who found that it was not a heart at all. In fact, it wasn't even human. It was simply a chunk of beef liver. Later, the Sodders heard rumors that Morris had been desperate to find or plant any remains at the site, thinking that would placate the grieving parents and get them off his back. In 1949, Tinsley and the Sodders, along with Washington, D.C. pathologist Oscar B. Hunter, did a thorough excavation of the fire scene. The search uncovered several small objects, coins, a partially burned dictionary, and several shards of bone. Hunter sent the bones to the Smithsonian Institution for further examination. The report determined that the bones represented 4 lumbar vertebrae from one individual who was at least 16 or 17 years old, but no older than 23. Again, this made no sense. The oldest missing child was Maurice, who was only 14 at the time of the fire. The report said it was possible, but not probable, that the bones of a 14-year-old boy could show the maturation of a 16-year-old. To further complicate things, the bones show no signs that they'd ever been exposed to fire. Whoever wrote the report even found it strange that in a situation where searchers expected to find evidence of 5 bodies, the only sign of any remains were 4 vertebrae. The report concluded that the bones were probably in the fill dirt that George had bulldozed over the burnt out basement to create a memorial garden for his kids. Tinsley later managed to trace the bones to a cemetery in Mount Hope, West Virginia. What bones from an unidentified grave were doing in the dirt at the Sauter home was just another part of the mystery. The case of the missing Sauter children was declared hopeless by Governor Oakey Patterson and State Police Superintendent W.E. Burchett. But the Sauter family hadn't yet given up hope. In 1952, they put up a billboard along U.S. Highway 16 near Ansted, West Virginia. The solemn faces of the three missing children gazed from the billboard as the headline above them shrieked, "What was their fate? Kidnapped, murdered, or are they still alive?" The family handed out flyers advertising a $5,000 reward. Later, they increased the amount to $10,000. Slim leads crept in from time to time. George saw a picture of some school children in New York City and swore he recognized his daughter Betty, the youngest of the missing children. He went to Manhattan to investigate, but the parents of the girl refused to speak to him. A letter came from St. Louis. A woman said that Martha, the oldest missing daughter, was in a convent there. In Texas, a tavern patron overheard a conversation about a mysterious Christmas Eve fire in West Virginia. And from Florida, word came that the children were staying with distant relatives of Jenny's. George investigated every single lead, but every time his search came up empty. Then, in 1968, over 20 years after the fire, an envelope arrived in the mail. It was addressed to Jenny. It bore a Kentucky postmark, but no return address. Jenny opened the mysterious envelope. Inside was a photograph of a dark-haired, dark-eyed young man in his mid-20s. Jenny turned the photograph over with trembling fingers. On the back was a cryptic note. Louis Sauter, I love brother Frankie. Little boys, 890-132 or 35. If this was a secret message from Louis, sent to reassure his family of his safety, it didn't answer any questions. But the young man in the picture bore an undeniable resemblance to Louis Sauter, who was 9 years old at the time of the fire. In fact, he was very nearly 10. He would have celebrated his birthday 5 days later. George and Jenny hired another detective and sent him off to Kentucky to investigate. They never heard back from the man. Nevertheless, they added the picture of the handsome young man to the billboard on U.S. Highway 16, and they enlarged the photo and hung it over the fireplace. The boy did so look like Louis, and if there was even a slim chance it was him, now they had a tenuous connection, with one of their missing children. Every single clue pointed to the five Sauter children having survived at the fire. All the evidence shouted that they were still alive and out there in the world somewhere, but where? Aside from that one cryptic photograph and a handful of possible sightings, the Sauter children were gone, like wisps of smoke in the wind. George Sauter died in 1968. He never stopped believing that someday his children would come home to him. Jenny retreated into her home and built several additions onto it, making a bulwark between herself and the world. She wore the black of mourning from the day after the fire until her own death in 1989. After Jenny's passing, the family took the billboard down. By that time, there was really no use in leaving it up any longer. The last Sauter child, Sylvia, is in her early 70s. She still keeps tabs on any possible news about her missing siblings. There are no ghosts in this story, only a deep and abiding mystery. There are no ghosts, only two grieving parents who lost half their family in one terrifying night. There are no ghosts unless you count the 5 young faces that kept watch from that billboard for so many lonely years. Their solemn gazes, staring down the West Virginia highway. There are no ghosts, only questions. Quick sip. All right, we're going to read one more, and that'll call it for today. And then I'll be back at 4 p.m. Pacific. We're going to be building that gingerbread house, so come on back. Oh, that's good water. I keep forgetting. These lights are hot, too. And they're a lot closer to me than what I have normally in the evening. The Weinkauf Hotel fire. In the first half of the 20th century, the United States was haunted by fire. The memory of 1911 was still fresh in the public mind. That was the year that fire had broken out on the top 3 floors of the 10-story Ash building. The building, touted as fireproof, had failed to live up to its billing, and 146 employees of the Triangle Shirtwaist Company, 123 of them young women, had unalived in the blaze. The early years of the 1940s had been especially lethal. In 1940, 198 people had been killed in a fire at a dance hall in Natchez, Mississippi. 2 years later, in November 42, the Coconut Grove Club in Boston was the scene of the deadliest nightclub fire in history, when 492 people died and hundreds more were injured. And on July 6, 1944, 168 people, mostly women and children, perished when the fire broke out in a Ringling Brothers circus tent in Hartford, Connecticut. 2 years after that, the possibility of fire was still very much on people's minds. But life goes on. In early December 1946, soldiers were coming home from Europe and the Pacific and the Pacific, and America was still celebrating the Allied victory in World War II. The country was just entering the post-war boom, and people were eager to start their Christmas shopping. The Weinkauf Hotel on Peachtree Street in downtown Atlanta was sold out for the weekend. Folks had come into Atlanta for an early start on Christmas shopping, and high school students from all over the state were in town for a youth assembly, sponsored by the YMCA, at the Georgia State Capitol. The hotel was packed, with 280 guests in the building's rooms. The Weinkauf Hotel, built in 1913, was 15 floors high, a steel structure enclosed in concrete. This absolutely fireproof hotel was designed and built without sprinklers, fire escapes, or an alarm system. However, the building met code. So when fire completely destroyed the magnificent Weinkauf on Peachtree on December 8, 1913, William F. Weinkauf and his wife Grace moved into the penthouse on the 16th floor of the new-built hotel. The Weinkaufs were probably pretty conscious of the fire's safety after the loss of their lavish mansion. At any rate, they felt secure enough in the hotel's design to make it their new home. But when a fire broke out on the third floor in the early morning hours of December 7th, it spread quickly through the building. The single central staircase acted as a hellish chimney, directing toxic smoke to the upper floors. Flames chewed through the rooms, filled with wooden furniture, upholstered chairs, draperies, and wooden Venetian blinds. The walls of the rooms were covered with painted burlap fabric, from the wooden baseboard to a chair rail 4 feet above the floor. From the chair rail to the ceiling, the walls were covered with up to 5 layers of wooden molding, provided decorative touch where the walls met. The voracious fire devoured it all. The Atlanta Fire Department got an alarm call at 3:42 a.m. Fire Chief Charles Styron arrived on the scene with the first trucks. He soon sent out a second alarm call, then a third. Styron eventually summoned help from fire departments outside the city. More than 40 fire trucks converged on the scene. 32 pumping engines, 4 aerial ladder trucks, 6 service ladder trucks, a floodlight truck, and a salvage and rescue truck. The aerial ladders would be crucial in saving lives because the Weinkauf had no fire escapes. The city fire department only had 5 aerial ladders. The problem was that the ladders of the trucks were too short. Chief Styron had been trying to order an additional 85-foot ladder truck for several years, but with factories retooled for war production, there was simply none to be had. Styron believed that any ladder over 85 feet long was unsafe. He knew that 2 longer ladders had collapsed under their loads in other cities. And indeed, during the fire, the city's longest aerial ladder truck with 100-foot ladder went out of service when the hydraulic system failed. Styron quickly moved an 85-foot ladder into position on Ellis Street to replace the longer one, leaving 2 trucks on Peachtree Street, a 75-foot ladder and a 55-foot mini aerial. But all this maneuvering was in vain, because the Weinkauf Hotel was 155 feet tall. The fire truck's ladders were simply and tragically too short to save people trapped on the upper floors. The ladders couldn't reach guests above the 8th floor. People above that floor had 3 options. They could fashion sheet ropes and slide down them to the top ladders. They could wait out the fire and hope that the firefighters could save the building. Or they could jump for a net. People who chose to jump from the lower floors were generally okay. But the nets were not designed to catch jumpers from higher floors. Many nets ripped on impact, spilling victims onto the pavement. Also, many people didn't realize how hard it would be to hit a target from 80 feet or more in the air. At the front of the building, the marquee was in the way of the jumpers. One woman, aiming for a net, impaled herself on a steel cable jutting from that marquee. Some would-be rescuers tried to put boards and ladders between the windows of the hotel and the windows of the mortgage guarantee building next door. This worked, but barely. The heights of the floors didn't match, and the ladders ended up canted at a 30-degree angle over a 10-foot distance. Some people did try to wait out the fire, trusting the firefighters to do their job and save the building. One man and two women in a room tried to wet down everything they possibly could so that the room wouldn't explode when the fire's gases were ignited by the heat. They filled the tub and the sinks with water and stopped up the toilet. But when the mattress began to smolder and the water standing on the floor near the door started to boil, they decided it was time to leave. One man, Reed Home, went to a window, took out his wallet, and pulled out 5 $20 bills. One by one, he waddled them up and dropped them out the windows of his room, trying to aim so the bills would land at the feet of 5 different people. He figured some people deserved to be lucky that morning. Reed and his wife, Carrie, survived the fire and were let out of the building by firemen when the fire was out. Other people took their chances with sheet ropes. Gladys Mitchell on the 16th floor put her long black fur coat on over her nightgown before trying to climb down a sheet rope to an aerial ladder. Ann Smith was climbing down the rope after her. Ann lost her grip and fell, knocking Gladys off on the way down. Ann's body plummeted to the street, but Gladys's left arm hit the steel cable supporting the Weinkauf sign. The cable snapped under the impact, and the ricochet wrapped the end of the cable around her arm. The long sleeve of her fur coat prevented Gladys's arm from being ripped off and saved her life. From the first alarm at 3:42 a.m. until 6:04 a.m., when the last flames were doused, the Weinkauf Hotel fire officially lasted 142 minutes. The death toll was 119, an average of 1 death nearly every minute. 32 guests died from injuries suffered from falling or jumping. 40 suffocated on toxic fumes, and 37 were listed as burn fatalities, although it was believed they'd succumbed to fumes before being burned. More than 80% of the deaths happened above the 8th floor, beyond the reach of the ladders. 16 people died on the 12th floor alone. 40% of the Weinkauf's more than 280 guests had died. William and Grace Weinkauf themselves were among the casualties. They perished in their 16th floor penthouse. A third of the survivors, 64 people, had to be hospitalized. Some of them died at the hospital, including 20-year-old Edith Birch, who died just before midnight on Sunday. She'd been climbing down a sheet rope when she fell and plunged through the canopy of the hotel. She survived the fall, but broke both arms and legs and suffered internal injuries. Her husband, George Birch, had come down the sheet rope after Edith. He was at her side when she died at the hospital. They had been married 6 months. Nearly 90 bodies had to be removed from the building. Most victims on the lower and middle floors had burned after suffocating. One body was so hot firemen had to hose it down before it could be lifted onto a stretcher. Charred flesh fell apart at the slightest touch. If the firemen found whiskey in the hotel rooms, they took swigs of it for courage. Firemen opened one door and found a pretty young woman sitting by the window. She was wearing a green dress, and her eyes were open. She appeared to be simply sitting near the window, calmly waiting for the rescue. But she wasn't alive. Several high school students perished in the fire. The parents of Frances Thompson and Gwen McCoy, 2 seniors from Gainesville, could not distinguish between the charred bodies of the 2 girls. The friends were buried together, and they shared a headstone. Author Sam Hay and Ellen B. Goodwin described the scene in their book, The Weinkauf Fire, The Untold Story of America's Deadliest Hotel Fire. The scene that met the firemen's gaze was one of utter, surreal devastation. Light bulbs have melted in the heat and dripped in long glass stalactites from their sockets. Telephones were shapeless blobs of black plastic. Wooden blades of ceiling fans had burned away. Clothes had turned to charcoal in hangers and closets. Toilets were cracked. The water in the necks of the fixtures had boiled, then turned to steam and exploded the porcelain. On Christmas Day, 1971, 162 people died in a fire at the Hotel T in Seoul, South Korea. With that tragedy, the Weinkauf Hotel no longer held the dubious honor of being the worst hotel fire in the world. It remains, however, the worst in the United States history. All right, that's it till next week. So I'll see you guys for this part. I'll see you guys next Sunday at probably noon. We'll do the same thing, noon again, noon Pacific, and then okay. So as far as this goes now, join me at 4 p.m. Pacific today. We're going to be working that first gingerbread house, and I got the roof on, so everything's nice and stable, so we can work on it. So that'll be around 4 p.m. Pacific. I'm going to try and run all three networks today. I apologize to everybody on the other two networks, because for some reason the video was not working, the audio was working, so I don't know what happened with that. So we're going to try and get all that straightened out today before we go out, and do this stuff. So I'll see you guys at 4 p.m. Pacific over at TikTok. Thank you guys for everything. Thank you for the likes, and I will see you guys on TikTok at 4 p.m. Pacific. Okay. Thanks everybody for coming. Okay, I want to stop. TikTok likes me so much, doesn't want to stop. There it goes. What is this? I don't know what this is. This is not what I want. Okay. Okay, there we go. Okay, now I stop. Okay, everybody. Well, that's it. Again, 4 Pacific. Well, 302 people watched live. So again, 4 p.m. Pacific, I'll be back, and we'll be building that gingerbread house probably till about 8 p.m. So we're going to spend a while on it so we can get it done today. I got to make a run over to Dollar Tree and get some extra stuff for the bills, so I'll be heading out there in a few minutes. But I'll see you guys at 4:30 at 4 o'clock Pacific, and well, hopefully it all works, and we'll be building a gingerbread. Thanks for coming, everybody, and here we go. I'm going to end the show. Maybe.